Redeem Academy.
He can even hypnotize crabs. The most famous sponge. Turns out he lives off the coast of New York. You can just attach leeches to people in various places and drain out some fluid. I'm really glad we don't live in that time period anymore. Yo, what is up, dung beetles? My name is Johnny. Welcome to Redeem Academy. We are in the middle, nearing the end of a taxonomy unit. Today is lesson 7, invertebrates. All right, big question today. Why would a creation God once called very good include harpoon-shooting jellyfish, blood-sucking leeches, and acid-spraying beetles? That's a great one. Special thanks to our sponsor today, the Dookie Wrangler. You should know 9 out of 10 Dookie Wranglers are subscribed to Redeem Academy. And if you want to avoid stepping on a Dookie Wrangler on your way to the bathroom in the middle of the night, that squish pop combination is no good between the toes. I suggest you go to redeemacademy.org to get a notebook. Now, Dookie Wrangler is himself an invertebrate. Invertebrates are simply animals that lack a backbone. In today's lesson, I am going to be going over 6 of these things today. 6 different categories of invertebrates. Let's start with number 1. All right, first on the list is this yellow guy right here. He is called a sponge. So I've got sponges written down right here. This blue guy or this teal guy would be a sponge as well. And so these are sea sponges. They're in the phylum. Notice that it says the 6 major phyla of invertebrates. Phyla is plural. And so these are sponges. They're in the phylum of Porifera. Okay, now, first and foremost, the most famous sponge, SpongeBob, turns out he lives off the coast of New York, about 1,800 meters down. Marine scientists caught this picture of him and Patrick the starfish together using a remote submarine. So there you have it. They actually do live off the coast of New York, and they hang out together all the time. All right, check this out. This is a real sea sponge. And this guy's swimming up to it. He's going to tell you what he's got in his hand there and what he's doing.
They might not look like they're doing much, but a simple demonstration shows how effectively sponges can pump water. On a reef in the Caribbean, I make a dive with a syringe filled with a non-toxic dye called fluorescein. By squirting it around the base of some sponges, we can observe how the water is moving by watching what the dye does. Within only seconds, the dye is pumped through the sponges along with the water. As you can see, a sponge is a pretty good water pump and also a good strainer. Any plankton that goes in with the water won't come back out through the osculum.
Isn't that crazy? I didn't really do a good job explaining this, but I am now moving on to animals, okay? Today's lesson is about animals. Sponges are not a plant in the ocean. They look like a plant, the way they're just sitting down there. They're invertebrates. They're one of the 2 categories of animals. Today's notes number 7, tomorrow's notes number 8 are both going to be about animals. So here we are, the 6 major phyla of invertebrates. Invertebrates are all phylums of animals. Animals that do not have a backbone. They make up over 95% of all the animal species. These are invertebrates. So he's going to show you a couple more of these types of sponges.
Tube sponges are even more spectacular to observe. They pump the dye so furiously that they look like a collection of miniature smokestacks.
Look at this big one.
It takes a few seconds for the dye to work its way through the sponge. Wait for it. But then it pours out like smoke from a chimney. That's pretty good pumping from those tiny little collar cells.
Okay, now you mentioned collar cells. So here's what a sponge is actually made to do.
A sponge is covered with small pores called ostia, which lead to a system of internal canals and eventually out to one or more larger holes called oscula. Within the canals of the sponge, chambers are lined with specialized cells called choanocytes, or collar cells. The collar cells have a sticky funnel-shaped collar and a hair-like whip called a flagellum. The collar cells serve 2 purposes. First, they beat their flagella back and forth like fans to move water through the sponge. The water brings in nutrients and oxygen while it carries out waste and carbon dioxide. Second, the sticky collars of the collar cells pick up tiny bits of planktonic food brought in with the water.
So that's how they eat. So sponges are actually animals who have tiny little hairs, and they filter things through. And as they filter things through, they eat what they're finding, and they're called filter feeders. Okay, so sponges are in the phylum of Porifera, and they are an animal that gets food by straining tiny plants and animals from water. That's called a filter feeder. All right, time for number 2, the jellyfish. All right, so here you have them, jellyfish. Sea anemones are also in this group. These are called Cnidaria. All right, this is great. So I just showed you jellyfish, but they actually have a phase where they're only connected to the ground. This is called the polyp phase of a jellyfish's life. And so jellyfish begin connected to the ground. Check out these little monsters.
They start life as pinhead-sized polyps. But what they lack in size, they make up for in numbers.
Jellyfish babies everywhere.
Gorging on tiny plankton.
And remember, jellyfish can sting.
Grow, mutate, and multiply into an army of clones.
Love the time lapse. So eventually they're going to butt off.
Becomes a production line with one purpose.
Oh, it just became an adult jellyfish. That little bud becomes what's called a medusa, which is an adult
Creating
jellyfish.
new jellyfish.
Now those little guys go and become adult swimming
Bodies
jellyfish.
that are 95% water can easily grow. And grow. Until they are monsters.
Look at that monster jellyfish.
No bones, no blood, or even brains, but perfectly suited to today's transforming seas.
A jellyfish is basically a plastic bag, but it's got these special cells. I think I've just learned since making my curriculum, they're actually not cells, they're actually individual little plastic sacs inside of cells, and they're called nematocysts, okay? Now check out how these things work. Here's the jellyfish. Jellyfish can get really long sometimes. They can get really long sometimes, but here's your jellyfish. We're gonna zoom in on the jellyfish, and we see the little nematocysts, which are actually little sacs inside of cells, and they shoot out little harpoons when something triggers them. Look at this. So that little thing's like a trigger, boom, hit the trigger, and they shoot out a painful little harpoon that injects venom into a person. So if you've ever been stung by a jellyfish, it hurts like really bad, okay? And so this guy hits one, and it hits him, and it stings really bad when you get hit by a jellyfish. And so homeboy is like, I need to get out of here. I just got stung by a jellyfish. It's still stinging me, and he's gonna throw it off any second now and get rid of it. Okay, and you can pour vinegar on the stings, and it helps to alleviate the pain a little bit. There is an old wives' tale that if you pee on it, that it won't hurt as bad. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure.
If I had to, I'd pee on any one of you.
Here's a real video of nematocysts firing under the microscope. Check this out. Boom! How'd you like to get hit by those? One more time. Chow, ooh, mama pajama. They're like tiny little needles poking into your skin, and then they inject venom. So those are the cnidarians who have that magic power. Those are jellyfish and sea anemones. So the sea anemone is the thing that Finding Nemo hangs out inside of to stay safe. So those things can shoot out. That's why other fish stay away from it. But Nemo is immune to those sea anemone stings. All right, time for number 3, starfish and sea urchins. All right, so these guys who have nematocysts in them, jellyfish, coral reefs, sea anemones, they all hunt this way. They're called cnidaria. And the tiny stinging cells that are actually stinging sacs that allow cnidarians to sting and capture prey before they consume it are called nematocysts. Nematocysts. All right. The starfish and the sea urchin, they have these radial patterns where everything goes in a circle. That phylum is called echinoderm. The full pronunciation there is echinodermata. All right, this is a great video. This shows a starfish that is stuck to the glass of an aquarium, and then their lizard died, and they're going to show you how a starfish eats. So we get to see the other side of a starfish that you normally can't see. And the interesting thing about a starfish is that it actually puts its stomach out of its body to eat. It's called stomach eversion. And so you see the starfish kind of move around this little lizard, but then his stomach starts coming out of his body in order to get around the lizard. Oh my gosh. So let me just pause this video right here. So everything I've drawn blue around there is the stomach of the starfish that has come out of the starfish's body and is now digesting and eating away at the lizard on the outside of the starfish's body. Look at that moment right there. So that's hours later. I mean, the lizard's basically gone and the whole stomach's out there. All right, now let me explain why starfish are adapted to doing this, because normally a starfish isn't up against a glass having someone shove a gecko in there for them to eat. So why is a starfish actually built to eat this way? Check out this little video right here of what's called a bivalve, or a mussel moving. So you've probably seen these on the beach. You probably don't really know what they are. This is called a mussel. Look at how it moves its body around. So it actually has muscle inside of itself, and it can stick it out, and then it can fill that with blood and then cause itself to move. Okay, here's another video. This one's gonna open up and it's gonna stick its leg down, and then it's gonna pull itself down. See that? And so the predator for one of these things is a starfish. What a starfish does is it comes and it gets up against one of these mussels, and the mussels are really good at pinching themselves shut. But a starfish actually has hydraulic pressure. So a starfish never gets tired because it's just water pressure pulling apart. So a starfish will put itself on a clam, and then the starfish will slowly pull the clam apart. Maybe, I don't know if it's hours or a day, but it will just slowly pull the mussel apart. And eventually the mussel it's muscle, so it gets tired. The mussel gives up and it cracks open. And then the starfish will stick its stomach inside of the clam, digest the clam on the inside, suck all the good stuff out of the clam, and then move on to the next clam. And that's why it has this ability to stick its stomach out, so it can digest one of these mussels with just a little bit of the mussel cracked open. So when you go to the beach and you find some of these mussels cracked open, the starfish has literally stuck its stomach inside of that thing, digested it, and moved on to the next one. All right, starfish and sea urchins, they have this radial symmetry. They're called echinodermata. That's their phylum. When an animal pushes its stomach outside its body to digest food, it's called stomach eversion. It's like the opposite of inversion. All right, that puts us on to number 4, leeches and earthworms. All right, leeches and earthworms are in the kingdom of Annelida. Okay, I'm assuming you're somewhat familiar with earthworms already, and I'm going the route of showing you a cool video of a leech instead.
Parasite. Nemesis to hikers. But it wasn't always this way. The same leech that's dreaded by pond swimmers was once a hot commodity. For thousands of years, draining blood from patients was considered one of the best treatments for everything from smallpox to scurvy.
Isn't that crazy? If you were with me on my first unit, you heard about Galen, and Galen had this idea that there were 4 humors, 4 fluids in the body, and you could just attach leeches to people in various places and drain out some fluid and then, you know, make a person well again. I'm really glad we don't live in that time period anymore.
And healers often used leeches to suck that blood out. Their favorite was Hirudo medicinalis. But losing all that blood usually did more harm than good, further weakening patients. By the end of the 18th century, science-based medicine was in, and leeches were out, at least for a while. So what are leeches anyway? Just horrible little vampires? Well, actually, they're more like earthworms. In fact, they share a common ancestor.
You hear that? That's called evolutionary bias. That is the mind of an evolutionist right there. All things must have a common ancestor. Things that are more similar have a more recent common ancestor. Everything eventually goes back to a bacteria. So there's some evolutionary bias coming through right there.
But some leeches developed a taste for blood, and they've become experts at stealing it. Leeches have suckers on both ends of their body. They use them to inchworm around. The big sucker at the back anchors the leech. Inside that front sucker is a muscular jaw, bearing 3 razor-sharp teeth.
Look at those suckers.
They use them to saw through the skin.
Ooh.
Once suctioned into place, the leech spews chemicals into the wound, like anticoagulants that thin the blood, keeping it from clotting. That lets the leech slowly suck away for up to 40 minutes.
40 minutes. He's filling up with blood. Look at all that blood in there.
When done,
Boop.
it leaves
Oh,
a
look at that scar.
3-point scar.
Look at that opening. Oh, yeah. Those 3 little...
At hospitals like California
teeth on it.
Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco, leeches have made a comeback.
This is the cool part. Okay, so how might that be useful still today? He's got a drug in his spit that keeps the blood from clotting. Okay, is that useful in any way in the modern medical world? Okay, watch out. This is going to look a little bloody and gruesome for a second. You're tough. You can handle it.
Okay, get ready. When doctors reattach body parts like fingers and ears, blood sometimes pools in them.
Let's pause it. Okay, so no, don't pause that. Okay, so my father-in-law and mother-in-law both cut their finger off when they were building their log cabin. Okay, they have the same missing part of their finger. If you cut off your finger, throw it in the ice box and drive to the hospital with it, they can reattach it. But what they just said in that video is, after they reattach it, sometimes the blood kind of clots in there and like keeps it from like successfully reattaching. So what they just said is they'll put a leech on the end of it, and the leech will kind of suck the blood out. It'll keep the circulation flowing, so the reattached finger is more likely to stay attached. And so the leech can kind of help with the circulation right when they reattach somebody's thumb who got cut off. It happens, and that's one thing the leeches are good for. Interesting. All right, over to the notes. Earthworms and leeches, one thing they've got going on is bilateral symmetry, okay? They're not radially symmetrical. They're not symmetrical in a circle. They're just symmetrical right down the middle. That's like me and you as well. These guys are part of Annelida, all right? And a body plan where parts are arranged in a circle, that was called radial symmetry. And a body plan where things are symmetrical just right and left, that's called bilateral symmetry. Okay, let's go over planes of symmetry again really quick. Think of a bicycle tire. If you take a bicycle tire and you divide it in any direction, it's still symmetrical to itself. So it has radial symmetry, symmetry in a circle. But if you take a Mr. Olkers, if you take me, I'm only symmetrical right down the middle. I have bilateral symmetry. The word lateral means side. So like in football, in high school football, they'll throw the lateral. It's like one of the plays they run, the lateral or the option. It doesn't work anymore after high school football for some reason, but only in high school football, that's a good play. Lateral means to the side, okay? And so if we just have one side of symmetry versus radial, which means in a circle, there's two different types of symmetry we talk about when we talk about symmetry in animals, okay? Radial to the side, lateral, radial in a circle, lateral to the side. All right, number 5 on the list, we've got the squid, the octopus, the snail, the slug. All of these guys are in a big category, and they are called mollusks or mollusca. Now, you might have noticed that I gave the cuttlefish a rainbow face because in this video, you're going to see he has the ability to change himself to any color he wants. He's got these amazing little cells on the surface called chromatophores, and they can chroma means color, I think, or something like that. He can basically make himself any color he wants, and he can even hypnotize crabs. Check this out.
But the reef is also a place full of opportunity.
There he is. He's a vicious predator.
A cuttlefish. It specializes in hunting crabs.
It's a little monster. It's like an alien. The cuttlefish is like an alien.
But a large crab is a dangerous quarry. It has powerful claws. The cuttlefish, however, has a remarkable talent. Its skin contains millions of pigment cells with which it can create ever-changing colors and patterns.
Love the sound effects.
And that, apparently, hypnotizes the crab.
He's like, oh, let me give myself up so you can eat me now. Shark.
A cuttlefish may be clever, but a shark is bigger. And it eats cuttlefish. Time to disappear.
Look at him blend into his surroundings. Look at that. He just disappears. He's right there and a shark doesn't see him.
Back to the hunt.
Back to the hunt.
A new target, but the same mesmerizing technique.
I'm hypnotized. Also, he makes his own sound effects, apparently. Dad jokes. Got him! He's lunch. How do you fit that in your mouth, cuttlefish? So, the cuttlefish is the perfect example of a mollusk. Mollusks are basically just lumps of tissue. Sometimes they have a shell, sometimes they don't. Cuttlefish actually have a shell, it's on the inside. Squid have a shell, but an octopus does not have a shell, usually. There is, I think, a species or two that has a shell. And so most of the things that have a shell, like those bivalves, the mussels that I showed you earlier, those are mollusks. So they're just a blob of soft tissue that lives in the ocean. They're probably a mollusk. Especially if they have a shell. Let's go to the notes. Okay, snails, clams, squids, octopuses, or octopi, whatever you prefer. They have bilateral symmetry as well. Those are the mollusks. M-O-L-L-U-S-C-A, mollusca. And that brings us to our final and arguably crunchiest group, the bugs, which crabs fit into. So think about that the next time you eat some crabs or shrimp. They're basically just bugs. Now, to be fair, they're not actually called the bugs. They're called the arthropods, arthropoda. But is it untrue that shrimp and crabs are basically the bugs of the sea? I think it's kind of true. The fact that you like to eat them, that's your problem. Now, you already got to see the dung beetle, which is one of my favorites. But here we have another beetle that is so interesting. This guy's called the bombarder beetle. He basically shoots an acid squirt gun out of his butt that also kind of blows up. Check this out.
This tiny beetle explodes to defend itself. The bombardier beetle has a defense mechanism like no other. When it feels threatened, it fires a boiling, toxic spray from its rear, reaching temperatures of 100 degrees Celsius, creating an explosive defense that deters predators instantly. But how does it do it? Well, this beetle has two chemicals stored inside its body. When danger strikes, it mixes them together, causing a violent chemical reaction. The result? A colorful burst of hot liquid that shoots out of its body. When it's not defending itself, the bombardier beetle spends its time scavenging, feeding on decaying plant matter and even other insects, ensuring it survives in a variety of environments: forests, grasslands, and even deserts. Despite its small size, the bombardier beetle is one of nature's most efficient survivors, using its unique defense mechanism and clever adaptations to thrive in a world full of danger.
All right, now the most species of all the phyla is in the arthropods because there are so many insects, so many beetles in particular. And so there's a lot of interesting creatures out there that are arthropods. Okay, so within arthropods, you've got insects, you've got arachnids, which is spiders, you've got crustaceans, which is a lot of the things that live in the ocean that have an exoskeleton, and you've got myriapods, which is a lot of the things with a lot of legs, okay? Things like centipedes and millipedes and all those things. All of these guys together make up the arthropods, which have a full name, arthropoda. And if we go down here, all of them have what's called an exoskeleton, which means that they have a hard outer covering that protects and supports their body. All right, well, that brings us back to the big question. Why would a creation God once called very good include harpoon-shooting jellyfish, blood-sucking leeches, and acid-spraying beetles? This is a great question. So you're going to have in your workbook some great questions about the fall. And so one way Christians understand some of these things, this is kind of how I think about it. When you read Genesis chapter 3, you see that God actually changed his creation after the fall. So we see that it wasn't until after Adam and Eve sinned that Eve was going to have pain in childbirth. It wasn't until after Adam and Eve sinned that there were going to be thorns and thistles. Whether you take Genesis to be absolutely literal in every way, or you take some of it to be sort of metaphor and symbolic, it seems that sin brought bad things into the world. And so it's possible that creation was actually changed by Adam and Eve's sin. And so if you take that in the most literal sense, it's possible that like some of these things, like the harpoon-shooting jellyfish, the nematocysts, those actually may have been designed after the fall. And that's weird to think about, that God would actually design things that were different after the fall. But that's the way the Bible talks about it, like thorns and thistles coming after the fall. Like he changed the creation after Adam and Eve sinned. And so that's kind of how I think about it. When you look at the bombardier beetle, it's like intelligently designed, like irreducibly complex. You don't get a bombardier beetle with these two chambers that have to mix this very sophisticated chemistry together. You know, you can't evolve that step by step, or else your whole body explodes before you ever shoot it out at the predator. So it seems like somehow God designed these things to exist after the fall. There's a lot of great ideas out there. You could read about it. But God kind of gave us some answers about this, that some things changed after Adam and Eve sinned. There's also, that's more of a young earth perspective I'm sharing with you. There's also old earth perspectives on this, where maybe some of these things were built in to creation before the fall happened, and it didn't come until after. Or maybe some of the fall came from Satan, and Satan's fall kind of caused some of this death and suffering to enter into the earth. Or you know, I'm not like a deep theologian on these things that they've got my brain around all the possibilities, but there are godly Christian men who have thought about these things and have unpacked possible explanations. And one thing I've discovered as a Christian is if you go and you search, if you find one answer like, I think these are some weak spots in this, you can go listen to another Christian thinker's answer and find some stronger points in this area. And you might end up over time actually being undecided because there's 4 or 5 good answers that all have some strong points. So that's a lot of me talking and not 100% like one answer. But I think it's good to look into these things and understand different strengths and weaknesses of multiple perspectives on it, okay? I go back to Genesis 3, and the simple answer from Genesis 3 is some things changed after Adam and Eve sinned. That seems to be the basic answer God gives us in Genesis chapter 3. Hey, I hope this lesson was interesting to you. There's a lot of really cool creatures out there that God made. Keep rocking, keep working hard, and being a good student, understanding everything God made, and enjoying Him through studying His creation. Peace out, brown trout.